Okay, so we have now got a slightly customised quiz that collects somebody's name and then uses it as they get questions right or wrong. But to make a quiz really useful and fun for the person taking it, we really need to keep a score. And this is where it starts to get slightly more complicated, but I know that you'll be able to cope with it. So we need to go into our Visual Basic editor. Now, if we're going to create a score, just like we created our box with our dimensions, the dim called user ID to store the person's name, we need to create another dim, another object to store the score, the number that people are going to. I'm not going to call it score. I'm going to call it number correct. So we'll start off by creating a box, an object with the name number correct. So that's done. Let's just get rid of those. So we've got our box to store the number correct, and what we need to do is that right at the beginning of the quiz that we have a actually I'll put those back. We need to set the score to 0. So number correct needs to be 0. So we'll have a subroutine which we'll call start, and at the start number correct equals 0. If I just press return, it'll put in my spaces for me. So at the start we've got a subroutine that says number correct equals 0. Now, up till now, whenever we've run our subroutines by clicking on boxes or action buttons from within our quiz, but this time we don't want to have to press a button to run that subroutine start. What we can actually do is, after they've put their name in, we can simply type start like that, and that will then run the subroutine to set number correct to 0. So the quiz starts, they get an input box saying what's your name, they enter that, and then we've told the computer to run the subroutine called start, which will set the number correct to 0. Now, when they get an answer right, this message box pops up saying well done. So what we need to do then is to create another subroutine, and I'll do it at the bottom, and we'll call this one, well, let's make it really obvious so that it's easy for you to understand. So add correct answer. Okay, so when they get the answer correct, number correct will equals number correct, which starts life as 0, plus 1. Just press enter to get my spaces. So number correct, when you get the answer right, number correct plus 1, add 1 on. So that's a subroutine, and we can activate our subroutine by putting it in here. So before it moves on to the next slide, we can activate it just by saying run. All we have to do is put the name of the subroutine in, add correct answer, and that will run that one. So if we have a look at this, so with the quiz starts, it creates an object called user ID, it creates an object to store the number correct, and it starts with this input box which says what is your name. They enter their name, it runs the subroutine called start, which sets the number correct to 0. The question goes on to the next slide, which is the question. If it's correct, then you get the well done, and then run the add correct answer subroutine, which will add 1 to number correct. If it's wrong, it just goes on to the next slide. Now at the moment we can't test and see if our number correct is adding up, if our subroutine is working, and if everything is working as we want it to, because we haven't got any visual way within the quiz of seeing that. So let's rectify that now, and we will go and insert a new slide at the end and put an action button in, which we don't haven't got the subroutine for that yet, so click here for the final score. Okay, so what they're going to do is then click, and it's going to run a subroutine, which we haven't written yet, to bring up the final score. So let's go and write that final subroutine, and so down at the bottom we'll put a sub in, we'll call it final score. And what we want here is a message box to pop up. So capital M, remember, MSG, capital B, message box, and inside our message box we want it to say, so speech marks, you scored, and then a space, close your speech marks, and we want it to give us, so the ampersand, and return us with number correct. So if we save that, now as I've saved that, I've noticed that that's gone red. Hopefully you can see why that's gone red. It's not right, it's not going to work. What have I forgotten? Yep, I've forgotten the close the brackets at the end. So I wanted to show you that. So make sure you look out for the when you save it, look for the red, and that will be very useful in picking out issues. So let's run through. So Bob is doing the quiz, he sees his instructions, he gets the answer right. Well done, Bob. I got rid of the feedback on there because obviously we're using it twice. So on this question, what does the S at the end of HTTPS seen on online shopping or banking websites stand for? The answer is secure. Well done, Bob. Click here for the final score, and there's nothing happening. Why? I hope you know. What I haven't done is I haven't hyperlinked, so I need to run that macro, final score. Okay, so it's important, all these little mistakes, I mean I'm making these mistakes on purpose so that give you a chance to work it out, but just to see that it is very much about trial and error, and you need to be aware of the small things that can go wrong. So I've got 2 correct, so I'm hoping that if our macro ran right, it says you scored 2. That's good, isn't it? It works. And hopefully, if Bob plays again and gets, let's get 1 right and 1 wrong, we should now get a score of 1. Good. So that works. So now you can complete your score.